Back when I was 20 years old, I was at a party. It was at my apartment building, and I was hanging out with my roommate, this guy, Paul. And we're standing there, and I see her, and I just go. I'm like, hey, Bob, what's up, dude? And he's like, oh, hey, Sam, right? And he hated me, and I just cut right in. But I didn't care because, like, looking at her up close, she was so beautiful. She had this, like, creamy golden skin and these bright hazel eyes and this amazing smile. I'm like, who are you? And she goes, I'm Genevieve. Like, who are you? And I'm like, oh, I'm Sam. She goes, oh, you're Sam. I'm like, oh, you've heard of me. She's like, yeah. And she wanted no part of me, but I didn't care because she was so beautiful. Like, I wouldn't let her talk to anybody else. I talked to her all night, and I just wouldn't let her talk to anybody else. And it was less than 6 months later, we were living together. And which was kind of a surprise to everybody involved, like all my friends. Like, my friends were like, wait, Sam has a girlfriend? Sam, he has a girlfriend. And my buddy Russ, like my best friend, his girlfriend, April, her reaction, like, she thought it was a hoax. And she goes, I want to meet this girl and warn her. Like, you know what he's like, right? And I said to Russ, I'm like, but dude, you know it's real, right? And he goes, actually, I don't. And he goes, look, I'm really happy for you if it's real, and if it's not, then you've really outdone yourself this time. And but you know, none of them could really believe it because, yeah, I'd never had a girlfriend before, but the fact was I'd never met anyone like Genevieve before. You know, she just moved here for college. She was an artist. She designed her own clothes. She was really passionate about art and literature and music. And sometimes, and I worked in television at the time, she would get so moved by something that she read, she would track me down on set. Like, I would get a phone call. I'd be on set somewhere, and I would pick up a phone, and she'd be like, I have to read this to you right now. You know, and she had these incredibly delicate hands, and we just always slept tied in a knot. Like, this was it. I was in love. Like, we were in love, and we knew we were going to be together forever. And we talked like it, too. I mean, we would lay there in bed at night. We would talk about how we wanted the marriage to be or how we wanted the wedding to be. And I said, I want us to get married at the beach. And she said, I know this great glass chapel. It's on the coast in the north. It's beautiful. I was like, done, right? We got the chapel. And then her mother loved me and had already promised us grandma's china, which was important, right? Because we were college kids who lived on futons, but now we had our china, which, you know, we've got the chapel, we got the china, we're done. Like, this is perfect, right? It was like everything was falling together perfectly as far as we thought. And but we were like a normal couple. We argued, we had fights about things, but the main issue that we fought about, like the big one, was children, right? Because the thing was, Genevieve had never wanted children. And I wanted 5. I grew up in this really horrible little family, and it was always a bummer. And so I thought, like, oh, let's have a big family. It'll be fun. It'll be our own party all the time. And she didn't get it, and we would fight about it a lot. And I would be like, if you love me, you would have my children. And she would be like, if you love me, you would not force me to pump more unneeded human footballs onto this planet and pollute the world, right? Like, this is how we fought. And we did it all the time, like at restaurants and parties and anytime there were people around. And they would look at us like, you guys are insane. Like, what are you arguing about? And we thought it was hilarious, right? Because it became a joke between us. Because it was a real issue, but we weren't really worried about it because we figured it'll just work out the way everything with us always just seemed to work out. That was until we found out that I already had a child. That changed everything. Whenever anybody finds out that they're a parent, it's a pretty dramatic event. When you hit play on your answering machine and you hear, my sister just had the baby. I'm coming for you, you son of a bitch. the drama kind of goes off the Richter scale, because the next message was a crying woman going, "Don't worry about my brother, I'll take care of everything," which was then followed by a third message from the brother assuring me that he was coming for me, you bastard, right? I'm like, it's like, and I'm listening. I played them over and over. I'm like, it's got to be a joke, right? It's a joke. It's a joke. It better be a joke. And so just to make sure, I called everybody that I knew. And I called my buddies. I was like, that was hilarious. Tell me, did you do this? Nobody knew what I was talking about. So I called back the three worst people that I knew. My three best friends, Rusty, Andrew, and Scott, right? Because this is what we did to each other. We were always doing things like this to each other. And I get Rusty on the phone. I'm like, dude, come on, tell me, did you do this? He's like, you already talked to me. I swear to you, I didn't do it. I get Andrew on the phone. And Andrew was just like always incredible. I'd known him since second grade. He was the only bitter second grader I'd known. Like, he was bitter his entire life. And he was just like, I already told you, it wasn't me, leave me alone. And I was like, okay, fine. And then I get Scott, right? Because that's it. It's just Scott now. And I'm begging him. I'm like, Scott, please, I am begging you, tell me, did you do this? Was this you? I need to know. And he goes, Sam, I promise you, I didn't do it. I don't know anything about it. It wasn't a joke. Like, I had a kid. And even worse, I had Genevieve standing behind me wondering, how had I managed to become a father 10 months into our relationship? Yes, we had been together for 10 months. Well, we'd been dating for 10 months. But we had only been committed for 8, and technically, I hadn't cheated. What had happened was, it was back on Halloween weekend, and my boss was having a costume party. It was a big party, it was a big deal, and I was invited. And Genevieve and I, we had these like coordinated costumes. We were gonna be, this duo. And my bosses they loved me, and they were excited to meet Genevieve. And then 5 minutes before I was supposed to leave to pick her up for the party, this was when I was still living with Paul, she calls and she goes, I'm sick, I can't go, I'm sorry. I'm like, no, don't do this to me. Like, I can't go in half of a costume. Don't do this. And she's like, I'm sorry, I'm sick. And the thing was, she wasn't sick, she was hungover. She'd been partying all night in Santa Barbara the night before at a Halloween party, right? And I was pissed. Coincidentally, earlier that day, I had come home early from work and found sitting on my couch my roommate Paul and this girl Bernadette, who I had been seeing before I met Genevieve. And this is how I found out that while I would be away at work, Paul had been taking my phone book and calling girls I used to date in an effort to sleep with them. Yeah, that was great to find out. And so we all had a very awkward few minutes. And the thing was, Bernadette had no interest in Paul, but she had been wondering what had happened to me, because when I met Genevieve, I just disappeared. I fell off the planet. So she leaves. Paul and I have a little chat about like how we're going to treat, boundaries basically. And I go into my bedroom, and sitting on my pillow is a little Post-it note with Bernadette's phone number on it and a lipstick kiss, and it just says, call me. A few hours later, Genevieve cancels on the party, and being the extremely emotionally mature 20-year-old guy that I was, I flipped out, I got extremely angry, and I called Bernadette, and I went to her house. And I had never been emotionally tied to anybody in my life before this. I wasn't prepared for what that was going to do to me. And it ate away at me. It killed me. It really ate me alive. But the only saving grace I had, there were two things that I kept telling myself that were trying to justify it, trying to make it okay. And they were, the first one was we weren't committed. We hadn't said the words. We hadn't said I loved you. We hadn't said we're committed. And then maybe more importantly, we hadn't slept together yet. So I hadn't cheated. But you try explaining that to a girl who loves you to depths and in ways that she can't even articulate. You know, a girl who, you know, gave you her virginity. It was awful. But I had to do it because I had a kid, and now I didn't have a choice. And I was standing there, and I started talking, and I started telling her all of those things that, like, just the most horrible things that she never wanted to hear in her life, ever. And as I started talking, she just started collapsing in on herself, and her eyes closed, and her hands just balled up into little fists, and she was dead silent. And we just hung there in that horrible silence. And then when she finally spoke, all she said was, "I'm leaving." And she did. Scott's girlfriend, Pam, lived in our building, and Genevieve went and spent the night downstairs with her. And I just spent the night smoking myself sick. Like I had a kid, right? And it was just crushing down on me, like, Genevieve's gone. I have a kid, and how am I gonna pay for everything? And, you know, I didn't know, like, somewhere out there, I had a child. I didn't know if it was a boy or a girl. I didn't know if they had a name. I didn't know anything. And I tried, like, and I could not remember Bernadette's last name. And I didn't have her phone number because I'd gotten rid of my phone book. And after that night, I got rid of everything. So I called Paul, and Paul's like, "Dude, I used your phone book. I have no idea." And so there was nothing I could do except just sit there and wait and rot, you know, and at some point the brother was going to call. Sometime around dawn, I heard the front door open, and Genevieve came back. And we were just standing there, just staring. Like, what do you say, right? Like, we're just standing there in that horrible silence, staring at each other. And the phone rang. And I'm like, well, it's the brother. And I answered it, and it was Scott. And he's like, "Dude, what the fuck is going on? Pam just called me. She said that you guys are, like, breaking up and Genevieve's moving out." I said, "Scott, I told you last night, man, I've got a kid. Genevieve's leaving me. My life is ripping apart." And Scott goes, "Dude, it was just a joke. It's just a joke, dude." It was a joke. Like, he got me. I looked at Genevieve, and I'm like, "It's okay. It was just a joke." And then I had to go take a shower and go to work. And 16 hours on set with that just, like, eating me alive. And it took 3 days before I was able to get Genevieve on the phone. I couldn't find her. And when I finally did get her on the phone, I don't know, I was trying to say anything I could to try to salvage us, to try to save us, to try to make it up. And that's when she said, I knew it was a joke. She said Scott had called her when he did it because he didn't want her to worry. But when I got scared, she got scared. And she knew something was wrong. And she needed to know what it was. And she found out. Thanks.
Give it up for Sam Feirstein, ladies and gentlemen.